Log entry, Captain Eva Rostova, stardate 4763.4. The Chronos Key, it's more than a map. It's a whisper from the void, a forgotten promise of mastery over moments. We found Xylos, the shadow market nestled in the corpse of a dead nebula. But Xylos found us first, its tendrils of greed and desperation coiling tight. If anyone finds this recording, drifting in the cold between worlds, warn them. The price for time is always too high, paid in blood and sanity. They're coming, the collectors, the Vraxians, always, collecting souls like stellar dust. The air in the obsidian hall of Xylos was thick enough to choke on, a miasma of stale synthetics and alien perfumes, and the metallic tang of desperation. Dim, blood-red light, favored by the hulking Colossian brokers, pulsed from crystalline fixtures embedded in the obsidian walls, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the patrons. Figures of every conceivable sentient species huddled in alcoves, or stood starkly in the gloom, their features obscured by environmental suits, cloaks, or simply the oppressive darkness. This was the underbelly of the galaxy, where anything could be bought or sold, if one had the credits and the nerve. At the heart of the cavernous hall, a raised platform held a single, stasis-locked data crystal, the Chronos Key star chart, rumored to map locations where time itself buckled and warped, where stable temporal anomalies offered passage to forgotten epochs or glimpses of futures yet unwritten. Kaelen, a human mercenary leader whose reputation for resourcefulness was as sharp as the vibro knife sheathed at his hip, stood near the edge of the assembly. His face, weathered by 100 campaigns and 1,000 calculated risks, was currently hidden behind a polarized enviromask, its surface reflecting the crimson glow. His eyes, however, were anything but masked. They scanned the room with an unnerving stillness, cataloging threats, escape routes, and potential rivals. He was here for the Chronos Key, a personal quest veiled in layers of professional detachment. He needed it for reasons he kept locked tighter than any ship's vault. His worn, dark gray flight suit, patched in several places but impeccably maintained, spoke of a man who valued function over flash. He was a study in controlled readiness, every line of his body poised for action. Across the crowded space, his gaze snagged on another solitary figure, the only other bidder who hadn't been scared off by the astronomical starting price or the implicit dangers of owning such an artifact. She was Ky'rellian, he guessed from her slender, tall frame and the subtle, iridescent sheen of her exposed skin, under the crimson light of pale lavender that seemed to absorb and refract the dim illumination. Her attire was a symphony of deep, thoughtful blues and regal purples, intricately woven fabrics that seemed to shift in color with her slightest movement. A hood shadowed her face, but he could sense an aura of intense focus, a stillness that mirrored his own, yet felt profoundly different. Ky'rellians, he knew, were rare this far out, their homeworld isolationist, their biology unique. They produced a substance, Ky'rellian, a naturally occurring neural enhancer and mild euphoric, making them targets for exploitation. This one, however, carried herself not like prey, but like a coiled serpent. He noted the way the light caught a small, intricately carved amulet at her throat, a spiral design that seemed almost to writhe in the dimness. Disturbingly familiar, like a half-remembered dream from a history datapad. The Xylosian auctioneer, a grotesque being with too many eyes and a voice like grinding stones, rasped out the final call. Going once, going twice to the silent bidders. The Chronos Key awaits its new master, or masters if a partnership is reached. Its multiple eyes swiveled between Kaelen and the Ky'rellian. The tension in the hall was a living thing, palpable and predatory. Kaelen had placed his final astronomical bid. He watched the Ky'rellian. Her head tilted slightly, a subtle movement, and then a soft chime indicated her counterbid, topping his by a mere fraction. Resourceful indeed, or perhaps just incredibly wealthy. Or desperate, Kaelen considered. He could go higher, stretch his resources to the breaking point. But his instincts, honed by years of survival, screamed a warning. Something was off. The air crackled with more than just the usual black market avarice. He'd observed several figures in the periphery, cloaked and armed, their postures too rigid, their attention too focused on the auction's conclusion. Vraxians. Their signature energy weapons had a distinct, sickening hum he'd learned to recognize the hard way. They weren't bidders. They were predators waiting for the kill to be claimed. Before he could make his next move, the crimson lights of the obsidian hall flickered, then died, plunging them into absolute blackness. A collective gasp, then chaos erupted. Emergency strobes, a chaotic, Disorienting white flashed intermittently, revealing scenes of pandemonium. The Vraxians didn't wait. Blaster fire, the distinct green bolts of Vraxian disruptors, stitched across the room. Screams echoed off the obsidian. The auction was over, the hunt had begun. Kaelen moved instantly, years of combat experience taking over. He dropped low, the polarized visor of his mask automatically adjusting to the strobing light, highlighting heat signatures. He saw the Ky'rellian woman react with equal speed, not with panic, but with a fluid grace that was almost unnatural. She didn't dive for cover, she moved through the chaos, a phantom in shifting blues and purples, her movements economical and precise. He saw a Vraxian lunging for her, and with a speed that defied her slender build, she sidestepped, her hand lashing out, a glint of something not a weapon, but perhaps an energy discharge from her own body, and the Vraxian stumbled, momentarily stunned. Thereafter the key and anyone who has it. Kaelen yelled over the din, his voice amplified by his comm unit, hoping she could hear. He was already moving towards a secondary exit he'd scouted earlier, a narrow maintenance tunnel hidden behind a loose obsidian panel. Survival first, acquisitions later. The Kaelen Lyra heard the humans shout. Her mind, usually a fortress of controlled thought, was a maelstrom. The sudden attack, the Vraxians. Her people had ancient warnings about the Vraxians, the soul collectors. The crimson light of the auction hall had been deeply unsettling, a color of warning and imminent loss in Ky'rellian symbolism. Now, the stark white strobes were even worse, representing stark, unavoidable truth and judgment. She had bid for the Chronos Key with every resource her small, hidden enclave possessed. It was their only hope, a desperate gamble tied to prophecy she barely understood but felt resonating within her, like an echo from a past life. The amulet at her throat, the starbinder's sigil, felt unusually warm against her skin. She saw the human, the other bidder, moving with a purpose that cut through the panic. He was heading for an escape route, his movements efficient and knowledgeable. He was a mercenary, she'd gathered from his scent, and the way he carried himself, a profession her people viewed with deep suspicion. But in this maelstrom, suspicion was a luxury. The Vraxians were closing in, their metallic voices barking orders in their harsh tongue. One lunged, and an instinctive pulse of bioenergy, a raw manifestation of the Ky'rellian, usually dormant within her, flared from her palm, making the alien recoil. It was a defense she hadn't consciously known she possessed, or perhaps one Lyra had known. Kaelen reached the panel, kicked it inward, revealing the dark maw of the tunnel. He glanced back. The Ky'rellian was a dozen meters away, fending off two Vraxians with a combination of agile evasions and those strange energy pulses. She was good, but outnumbered. "Ky'rellian! This way, if you want to live!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony. He didn't have time to be a hero, but leaving her to the Vraxians felt wrong, a strategic misstep as much as a moral one. Besides, she might still have access to the key, or information about it. Lyra saw her chance. The human was offering an escape. Trusting a mercenary went against every tenet of her upbringing, where loyalty was to the collective and outsiders were met with cautious reserve. But the Vraxians were a far greater, more immediate threat. Her body, already reacting to the stress, felt lighter, stronger. The unique physiology of the Ky'rellians allowed them to process adrenaline and G-forces in ways other species couldn't. She dodged another disruptor bolt, the air sizzling where she'd been a nanosecond before, and sprinted towards the tunnel, her purple cloak billowing behind her like a storm cloud. The color purple, for Ky'rellians, signified royalty, mystery, and often sacrifice. She hoped it wasn't the latter today. She reached the tunnel just as Kaelen was about to disappear inside. He paused, offering a hand. She hesitated for a bare moment, then took it. His grip was firm, calloused, surprisingly steady. Not the hand of a brute, but of a survivor. As their hands touched, a faint shimmer of gold, the color of pure Ky'rellian energy, pulsed from her skin, imperceptible to most, but Kaelen, observant as ever, caught the briefest flicker, a warmth that spread up his arm. He filed the observation away. "Move," he grunted, pulling her into the oppressive darkness of the tunnel. Behind them, the sounds of the Vraxian assault on the obsidian hall intensified. The relative quiet of the narrow passage was a stark contrast. It was tight, smelling of rust and ozone. Kaelen activated a small mag torch on his wrist, its beam cutting a swath through the gloom. "They'll have this tunnel covered if it's on any schematics," Lyra said, her voice low and melodic, surprisingly calm despite the chaos they'd just escaped. The dim, focused light of the torch was a deep blue, a color of calm and introspection in her culture. She found it oddly soothing after the aggressive reds and whites. Kaelen nodded. Xylos security is a joke. Vraxian intelligence, however, is not. This tunnel leads to the lower maintenance conduits. From there, it's a maze, but it'll take us towards the secondary landing pads, not the main ones, which will be swarming. His resourcefulness was already apparent. He knew this place. They moved quickly, Kaelen in the lead. The tunnel twisted and turned. After a few minutes of rapid, silent progress, they heard heavy footsteps and harsh Vraxian voices from a junction ahead. Kaelen held up a hand, extinguishing his torch. They pressed themselves against the cold, metallic wall. The Vraxian patrol passed, their armor clanking. Kaelen waited a beat, then reactivated the torch. Its beam now a muted green, a color of growth and strategy for Ky'rellians. Lyra noted with a flicker of approval she quickly suppressed. This human was practical, if nothing else. The auctioneer. Lyra said softly. He mentioned the key could only be truly claimed through a trial, should the bidding result in a tie or interruption. Kaelen glanced back at her, his masked face unreadable. Convenient for him, or for whoever designed this little treasure hunt. Did you win the bid? Or did I? My final bid was logged nanoseconds before the blackout. Lyra stated. Technically, the Chronos Key should be mine. Technically, Kaelen repeated, a hint of dry amusement in his tone. And technically, we're currently running for our lives from a Vraxian death squad, who also wants your technical property. Possession is 10/10 of the law in places like Xylos. They reached a wider section of the maintenance network, a nexus of pipes and conduits. Suddenly, the floor beneath them groaned, and a section slid away, revealing a deep shaft. Before either could react fully, heavy metallic nets shot out from hidden emplacements in the walls, entangling them both. Energy tendrils within the nets pulsed, delivering a paralytic shock. Kaelen grunted as his muscles seized. Lyra gasped, her body arching against the restraints, a flash of lavender light briefly illuminating her features as her unique biology fought the neurotoxin. It was a potent shock, designed to incapacitate even a heavily armored soldier. From the shadows above, a new figure emerged, not Vraxian. This one was tall and wary, clad in sleek, black armor that seemed to drink the light. Its face was obscured by a reflective visor that mirrored their own trap forms. It spoke in perfect, unascended galactic standard, its voice filtered and chillingly calm. Bidders Kaelen, Terran Confederacy designation Mercenary, and Lyra of the Ky'rellian Enclave designation Anomaly. The figure gestured, and the nets began to hoist them upwards. The Master of Xylos regrets the interruption to the auction. However, the Vraxian interference has complicated matters. The Chronos Key is not merely a prize to be bought. Its original creators, the long-vanished precursors, embedded a final safeguard, a trial. Only one may claim it, and since the Vraxians have now made their intentions clear, we shall expedite this process. You will compete. For the key. For your freedom. They were winched into a brightly lit chamber, circular and stark. The Master of Xylos, the shadowy information broker, who ran this den of thieves, stood on a raised dais. A small, unassuming creature of indeterminate species, surrounded by heavily armed guards in the same black armor. Its eyes like polished jet fixed on them. The Vraxians believe one of you is, or will lead them to, something they call the Lumina's tier. The Master said, its voice surprisingly reedy. A panacea, a myth. They also seem unusually interested in you, Ky'rellian. Your unique biological signature. They seek an infallible truth drug. Your cooperation in this trial will be illuminating. The nets released them, and they stumbled onto the cold metal floor. Their limbs were still heavy, the paralytic agent slowly wearing off. Two pedestals rose from the floor on opposite sides of the chamber. On one, a simple vibro blade. On the other, a Ky'rellian energy staff, one Lyra recognized as a traditional dueling weapon of her people, humming with latent power. The colors of the room were starkly utilitarian grays and silvers, colors of neutrality and cold logic to Lyra. The rules are simple. The Master of Xylos chirped. The first to incapacitate the other claims the Chronos Key. The loser will be handed over to the Vraxians as odd gesture of goodwill. They are becoming impatient outside. A vid screen flickered to life, showing Vraxian cruisers blockading Xylos Station. The stakes were clear. Kaelen slowly flexed his hands, feeling returning. He looked at Lyra. Her hood had fallen back, revealing a face of striking, ethereal beauty framed by hair the color of a midnight sky. Her eyes, large and the color of amethysts, met his. He saw not fear, but a flicker of something ancient and fierce, a spark of the Lyra her amulet hinted at. Her expression, however, was schooled into Ky'rellian stoicism. They saw emotions as a weakness to be controlled. He was observant, he saw the minute tremor in her hands, the slight quickening of her breath. She was afraid, but she was also something more. "This is barbaric," Lyra stated, her voice tight. The idea of fighting this human, even a mercenary, was distasteful. Ky'rellian trials of leadership were about communal consensus, psionic resonance, not brute force. Yet, the alternative was the Vraxians. "Welcome to the Outer Rim," Kaelen said, his voice flat. He walked towards the vibro blade, picking it up. It felt familiar in his hand, an extension of his will. He looked at Lyra, who had moved towards the energy staff. It hummed in her grasp, glowing with an inner light that matched the deep indigo of her sash, a color of wisdom, but also of potential sorrow. The Master of Xylos clapped its small, clawed hands together. "Begin." Lyra raised the staff, its ends crackling with energy. Kaelen adopted a defensive stance. He didn't want to fight her. His resourcefulness was screaming that this was a rigged game, a distraction. But he also couldn't afford to lose. The Vraxians were a death sentence. They circled each other. Kaelen was a seasoned fighter, relying on pragmatism and exploiting openings. Lyra moved with a dancer's grace, the staff an extension of her limbs. He could see her natural Ky'rellian agility, their famed tolerance for high-G maneuvers translating into incredible speed and balance. He feinted, a quick slash of the vibro blade. She parried with the staff, a shower of blue sparks erupting where energy met vibrating metal. "There has to be another way." Kaelen grunted, pressing his attack, testing her defenses. "They want one of us for the Vraxians. They don't care who. Collaboration is not an option presented." Lyra replied, her breath coming faster. The staff whirled, forcing him back. She was strong, surprisingly so, and skilled. There was a depth to her fighting style that spoke of training, or perhaps instinct. The Lyra echo. Kaelen ducked under a wide swing, the staff humming over his head. He saw an opening, a chance to disarm her, perhaps a disabling blow. But he hesitated. He saw the conflict in her amethyst eyes, the same desperation he felt. He also saw something else, a flicker of that golden Ky'rellian energy around her hands, a subtle aura. Was it just stress, or was she consciously channeling it? It was Lyra who broke the pattern. As Kaelen pressed forward, she suddenly dropped her staff. It clattered to the floor. She stood, vulnerable, her hands raised slightly. The indigo light of her sash seemed to deepen. "I will not fight you, human," she said, her voice clear and steady, though Kaelen detected the tremor beneath the surface. "If one of us must be sacrificed, let it be the one whose people have already suffered too much at the hands of slavers. I yield." Kaelen froze, vibro blade held ready. This was unexpected. He'd anticipated a fight to the bitter end, forfeiture, from someone who bid so fiercely for the key. His observant nature kicked in. Was it a trick, or was it something else? He looked at her posture, the genuine resignation in her eyes. The Vraxians were particularly interested in her. This wasn't just about the key anymore. The Master of Xylos tittered. How noble, or foolish. "The Ky'rellian yields?" "The human Kaelen claims the Chronos Key." Guards moved forward to apprehend Lyra. Kaelen made a split-second decision, his resourcefulness finding a different path. He lowered his vibro blade. "No." The Master's eyes narrowed. "No," she yielded. "The contest is over, but the terms were incapacitate," Kaelen said, his mind racing. "She's not incapacitated. She chose." "That's different." He took a step towards Lyra. "And I'm not handing anyone over to the Vraxians." He then did something utterly unexpected. He turned and hurled his vibro blade with pinpoint accuracy not at Lyra, but at the control panel for the chamber's main door, the one the guards were standing near. The blade slammed into the console, showering sparks. Alarms blared. The heavy door, momentarily deprived of power, began to hiss open. "What is the meaning of this?" The Master shrieked, its composure finally cracking. "Change of plans," Kaelen said, grabbing Lyra's arm. "We're leaving. Together. And we're taking the key." He gestured towards the Chronos Key, still on its pedestal, now unguarded as the black-armored guards reacted to the sabotage door. Lyra stared at him, stunned. The human, the mercenary, was choosing to defy the Master of Xylos, to risk everything, for her. It was illogical. It was unexpectedly honorable. A strange warmth spread through her, chasing away some of the icy fear. The amber hue of Kaelen's eyes, previously just a neutral observation, now seemed to hold a spark of something she couldn't quite name, but it wasn't hostile. It was protective. The guards, recovering from their surprise, opened fire. Kaelen shoved Lyra behind him, using his own body as a shield as he returned fire with a concealed sidearm he'd managed to keep. "Get the key!" he yelled. Lyra didn't hesitate this time. Her Ky'rellian agility served her well. She dodged a stray blast, her purple cloak swirling, and snatched the Chronos Key data crystal from its pedestal. It felt cold in her hand, yet pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. The starbinder's sigil at her throat grew noticeably warmer. "Got it," she called out. "Good. Now." Through that door, Kaelen laid down suppressing fire, forcing the guards to take cover. The damaged door was only partially open, but it was enough. He backed towards it, pulling Lyra with him. They squeezed through the gap just as heavy Vraxian disruptor fire began to impact the other side of the chamber. The Master of Xylos was screaming threats and orders, but his voice was lost in the din of renewed combat. The Vraxians were breaching the Master's private sanctum. Kaelen and Lyra found themselves in another service corridor, narrower than the first. Explosions rocked the station around them. Xylos was tearing itself apart. That was reckless. Lyra said, breathing heavily, clutching the Chronos Key. The light in this corridor was a flickering emergency orange, a color of chaos and urgent warning in her culture. It felt appropriate. "Reckless got us out, didn't it?" Kaelen retorted, already scanning for their next move. "And it got us this." He tapped the data crystal in her hand. "No, we just need to get off this rock before the Vraxians or what's left of Xylos security nails us." "My ship is on pad 7, Lyra offered. "It's small, fast, built for Ky'rellian reflexes." Kaelen nodded. "Better than my freighter, which is probably Vraxian target practice by now. Lead the way. And try not to yield again, unless it's a really good idea." There was no malice in his tone, just a wary pragmatism. Lyra felt a ghost of a smile touch her lips, an expression so rare for her it felt foreign. "I will endeavor to be more strategically compliant." The human was infuriating, unpredictable, and had just saved her life at great personal risk. Her carefully constructed emotional barriers were showing definite cracks. The shared danger, his unexpected sacrifice, had forged a fragile, unacknowledged bond. Their escape from Xylos was a blur of close calls and desperate improvisations. Kaelen's combat skills and Lyra's incredible agility, enhanced by her body's natural G-force tolerance which allowed her to move and react with breathtaking speed during sudden structural collapses or explosions, got them through collapsing corridors and Vraxian patrols. They commandeered a maintenance skiff, Kaelen expertly piloting it through ventilation shafts, barely wide enough to accommodate the vehicle, the G-forces sometimes extreme, but Lyra seemed utterly unfazed, even offering calm navigational advice based on the station's vibrations. During one particularly violent maneuver to avoid Vraxian fire, Kaelen was thrown against the console, his head striking metal. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Lyra reacted instantly, her hand shooting out to steady the skiff's controls while her other gently cupped his head, her touch surprisingly soft. A faint golden luminescence, the Ky'rellian, emanated from her palm, and the sharp pain in Kaelen's head dulled to a manageable throb. His vision cleared. "Thanks," he muttered, shaking his head. "What was that?" "Ky'rellian remedy," Lyra said evasively, withdrawing her hand, the golden glow fading. The ambient light from the skiff's damaged console flickered a pale green. Growth. Healing. She hadn't meant to use the Ky'rellian so overtly, but his injury had been an instinctive trigger. It was a substance her people guarded jealously, its properties legendary, its potential for misuse enormous. "It helps with trauma." Kaelen gave her a long, searching look. "Valuable stuff. More valuable than you know." Lyra replied quietly, turning her attention back to their route. They finally reached pad 7. Lyra's ship, the Starlight Whisper, was a sleek, silver vessel, shaped like a drawn-out teardrop, its surface shimmering with an inner light. It looked more like a piece of art than a starship. Vraxian skirmishers were already trying to breach the landing pad's energy shields. "Get her powered up," Kaelen yelled, providing covering fire with his blaster as Lyra sprinted towards the ship's ramp, which hissed open at her approach. The interior lights of the Starlight Whisper glowed a serene sapphire blue as she entered, a color of deep space and safe passage. The cockpit was designed for a Ky'rellian, minimalist and intuitive. Lyra strapped herself into the pilot's seat, her hands flying over controls that lit up in response to her touch, each color significant. Deep violet for ignition sequences, potential and power. Emerald green for navigation, guidance, and journey. Kaelen barely made it up the ramp as she sealed the hatch, disruptor bolts searing the hull. Hold on, Lyra warned. The Starlight Whisper's engines flared with an intense, pure white light, the color of absolute power and escape. With a maneuver that would have pulpified a normal human pilot, not securely strapped in, she wrenched the ship off the pad, dodging Vraxian fighters, and blasted out of Xylos' collapsing docking bay. The G-forces were immense, pressing Kaelen deep into his co-pilot seat, but Lyra seemed merely focused. Her amethyst eyes narrowed in concentration, her body perfectly attuned to the ship's violent acrobatics. Once clear of Xylos' immediate debris field in the Vraxian blockade, Lyra eased the engines, the ship settling into a smooth, silent run through the void. The interior lights shifted to a calming cyan, the color of tranquility. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Kaelen unstrapped himself, feeling bruised but alive. Nice flying. That G tolerance of yours is something else. Lyra gave a slight nod, her stoic mask firmly back in place. Though Kaelen thought he saw a flicker of pride in her eyes. Ky'rellian physiology is efficient. She looked at the Chronos Key data crystal, which she had placed in a secure niche on the console. We have the key. Now what, human? Kaelen, he corrected gently. My name is Kaelen. And first, we figure out what this key unlocks. And why the Vraxians, aside from their usual charming desire for everything that isn't theirs, want it so badly they'd attack Xylos itself. You mentioned something about a Lumina's tear. Lyra nodded, her gaze distant. It is an ancient Ky'rellian legend, a creature of pure light and sorrow, whose tears are said to be a panacea, capable of healing any wound, curing any disease. Some even say they can mend a broken spirit. Her voice was soft, tinged with a reverence that surprised Kaelen. The Vraxians, if they could capture such a creature, would not use its gift for healing. They seek an infallible truth drug, a way to break any mind, to enslave wills completely. The Lumina's tears, twisted by their science, it would be an abomination. And the Chronos Key leads to this Lumina, Kaelen surmised. So the prophecies say. Lyra affirmed. The Lumina exists outside normal time, in a place only the key can reveal. It is said Alara, the star bender of old, was the last to commune with it. She touched the amulet at her throat. This sigil is said to resonate with the key in the Lumina's path. Kaelen looked at her, then at the amulet. Alara the Starbender, a legendary Ky'rellian figure from millennia past, a warrior mystic who supposedly navigated by starlight and forged alliances that saved her people from an ancient darkness. He was starting to understand the Vraxians' heightened interest in Lyra. It wasn't just the Ky'rellian. They suspected she was more than she appeared. Reincarnation of a legendary figure. The Master of Xylos had hinted. He was beginning to think the Master wasn't just being theatrical. So, we're on a quest for a mythical creature, guided by a possibly reincarnated space wizard, using a map that breaks time, all while being hunted by galaxy-class slavers. Kaelen summarized, a wry smile playing on his lips. Just another Tuesday. Lyra didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Your Terran humor is peculiar. She adjusted a control, and a holographic display shimmered into existence between them, projecting a complex, shifting star chart derived from the Chronos Key. It was unlike any map Kaelen had ever seen, swirling with temporal eddies and impossible geometries. The key is complex. It will take time to decipher. The light from the hologram was a vibrant, multi-hued gold, a color of discovery and profound knowledge. Time we might not have? Kaelen said, his expression turning serious. The Vraxians won't give up. They want you, Lyra, and they want that Lumina. We need to stay ahead of them. He leaned closer to the holographic chart, his observant eyes scanning its intricate patterns. Let's see what secrets old Alara left for us. Over the next few shipboard days, a tense but functional rhythm established itself between Kaelen and Lyra. They were fugitives, adrift in the starlight whisper, a tiny spark of defiance against the vast, uncaring void and the relentless Vraxian pursuit. The ship, Lyra's sanctuary, became their shared world. Kaelen, with his mercenary background, was initially an unwelcome intrusion into her meticulously ordered existence. Lyra, with her alien customs and emotional reserve, was an enigma Kaelen was slowly, cautiously trying to understand. They took turns piloting and resting, though Lyra seemed to require far less sleep than he did. When she did rest, she would enter a light meditative trance, her body perfectly still, her breathing almost imperceptible. The ambient lighting in her presence would often shift subtly, soft lavenders for introspection, or muted silvers for deep thought, colors Kaelen was beginning to associate with her moods, even if she denied having any. Kaelen, resourceful as ever, took stock of the Starlight Whisper's capabilities and their limited supplies. The ship was fast and agile, clearly designed for evasion, but lightly armed. Their food rations were Ky'rellian, nutritious but bland to his palate, mostly synthesized protein paste and dried fruits, their colors pale greens, muted oranges, dull purples carefully chosen for balance and minimal emotional stimulation, according to Lyra. He once found a small packet of Terran chocolate he'd stashed in his suit and offered her a piece. She regarded it with suspicion, its dark brown color holding no particular significance in her cultural lexicon, before hesitantly trying it, the surprised flicker of something akin to pleasure in her amethyst eyes. Before she schooled her features was a small victory for Kaelen. Their primary focus was the Chronos Key. The holographic star chart it projected was a constantly shifting puzzle. Lyra, with her innate connection to the Starbinder's sigil, seemed to have an intuitive grasp of its precursor logic, while Kaelen's analytical mind and experience with ancient alien codes helped decipher its more arcane symbols. They worked for hours in the cockpit, bathed in the chart's golden light, their shoulders sometimes brushing as they leaned in to examine a particularly complex stellar configuration. The Vraxians are technologically superior slavers. Kaelen mused one cycle, tracing a finger over a swirling nebula on the hologram. They view other sentience as commodities, an infallible truth drug, derived from the Lumina's tears. It fits their absolute control. Lyra nodded, her expression grim. The light in the cockpit was currently a somber gray, reflecting her thoughts. They seek to prove their species' superiority through technological marvels of subjugation. The Lumina is not just a panacea to them, it's a weapon of ultimate psychological warfare. Her voice was low, intense. My people have always believed the Lumina must remain free. Its sorrow is a reflection of the galaxy's pain, but its tears are a promise of healing, not control. What about this Lyra? Kaelen asked, changing the subject slightly, observing her reaction. You seem to know a lot about her. Lyra's hand instinctively went to the Starbinder's sigil. She is a part of me. Or I am a part of her. The memories, the feelings, they are not always my own. Sometimes, when I look at the stars, I see them through her eyes, recall paths she walked, battles she fought. She looked at Kaelen, a rare vulnerability in her gaze. My enclave believes I am her return, that I am destined to protect the Lumina, as she once did. That's a heavy burden, Kaelen said softly. He'd seen men crack under less pressure. Yet Lyra bore it with a quiet strength that impressed him. It is a Ky'rellian burden, she replied, the stoic mask slipping back into place. We do what is necessary. The light shifted to a determined blue. One ship day, while Kaelen was attempting to repair a minor system damage during their escape from Xylos, he cut his hand on a jagged piece of metal. It wasn't a deep wound, but it bled freely. Lyra, who had been observing his work from a short distance, her presence a silent counterpoint to his focused effort, moved to his side instantly. Allow me, she said, her voice calm. Before he could protest, she took his injured hand. Her touch was cool. Again, he saw that faint golden luminescence gather in her palm, brighter this time. She pressed her hand over his wound. There was a gentle warmth, a tingling sensation, and when she removed her hand a few moments later, the bleeding had stopped, the cut already knitting itself closed, leaving only a faint pink line. Kaelen stared at his hand, then at her. Kerosene? Lyra nodded. A concentrated application can accelerate cellular regeneration. It is one of its properties. The light around them had subtly shifted to a soft, healing rose gold, a color she rarely manifested, a color of deep care. She seemed almost embarrassed by the display, quickly turning away to adjust a non-existent control on a nearby panel. You're a walking medical kit, Kaelen observed, flexing his fingers. Among other things. He saw the conflict in her, the ingrained cultural imperative to hide her unique abilities, warring with an equally strong, perhaps Lyra-influenced, instinct to help. It makes me a target, she said, her back still to him, her voice tight. The Ky'rellian is why many of my people are enslaved, or live in hiding. Its euphoric and neural enhancing properties are highly sought after on the black market. I'm not the black market, Lyra, Kaelen said gently. He reached out, hesitantly, and placed a hand on her shoulder. She stiffened for a moment, then, surprisingly, relaxed slightly under his touch. And I'm not the Vraxians. She turned to face him, her amethyst eyes searching his. The rose-gold light softened, deepening into a warm amber, the Ky'rellian color of trust and shared warmth. I know, Kaelen. The admission was quiet, but it resonated in the small space of the cockpit. Their progress with the Chronos Key was slow but steady. It wasn't a straightforward map, but a series of celestial alignments and temporal calculations that had to be solved sequentially. Each solved puzzle revealed another layer, another clue to the Lumina's hidden sanctuary. During one intensive session, Lyra, deep in concentration, began to hum a haunting, ancient melody. Kaelen listened, captivated. It was a song filled with sorrow and starlight, a melody that seemed to echo across millennia. When she finished, a single tear traced a silver path down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, her composure momentarily fractured. The light around her flickered, a chaotic mix of sorrowful blue and confused lavender. Alara's lament, she whispered, more to herself than to him. She sang it after the Battle of Xylos Prime, when the Old Ones fell. She looked at Kaelen, her eyes wide with a dawning understanding. Xylos, the name of the station, it's no coincidence. The precursors who built the key, they knew this system. Lyra fought a great battle here, long ago, against an enemy that sought to weaponize time itself. Kaelen's mind raced. The doomed expedition log, he'd once heard parts of mentioned Xylos. The threads were coming together. The Chronos Key was more than a map. It was a legacy, a warning. As they delved deeper into the key's mysteries, the Vraxians intensified their hunt. Twice, they had to make emergency jumps into uncharted space as Vraxian scout ships got too close. During one such jump, the Starlight Whisper's engines strained, and they were thrown violently. Kaelen, despite being strapped in, felt the crushing G's. Lyra, however, seemed to flow with the ship, her body absorbing the stress, her hands never faltering on the controls. The light in the cockpit turned a fierce, protective crimson, the color of Ky'rellian battle readiness, as she navigated them through a dense asteroid field at impossible speeds to shake their pursuers. After that escape, they found themselves in a quiet, uncharted nebula, its gases glowing in hues of deep violet and rose. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and for a moment, they simply stared out of the viewport, the tension easing. The light inside the cockpit softened to a gentle lavender. We can't keep running like this, Kaelen said, his voice tired. They'll catch us eventually. Lyra nodded. The key, I believe I am close to the final sequence. It points to a system called Aethel's Rest, described as a place where stars weep. Stars weep. Kaelen raised an eyebrow. Poetic, and probably dangerous. The Lumina's tears are starlight solidified by sorrow, according to the oldest texts. Lyra murmured, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula outside. Aethel's Rest, it must be where we find it. It was then, in the quiet beauty of the unknown nebula, that the emotional walls Lyra had so carefully maintained finally crumbled. Perhaps it was the shared danger, the intimacy of their forced proximity, or the growing trust between them. Or perhaps it was the influence of Lyra, who had known love and loss on a galactic scale. She turned to Kaelen, her amethyst eyes luminous in the soft lavender light. Kaelen. She began, her voice barely a whisper. My people believe emotions are a weakness, a distraction from duty. We are taught to suppress them, to present a facade of stoic control. The colors we choose for our environment, our clothing, they are meant to reinforce this control, to project the desired state, not reflect the inner turmoil. Kaelen listened, saying nothing, his observant gaze gentle. But with you, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, I feel things I am not supposed to feel. Fear, yes, but also gratitude. And something warmer. A blush, the color of a sunrise, spread across her lavender cheeks, a phenomenon Kaelen had never witnessed on her before. The ambient light around her shifted, unconsciously, to a soft, hesitant rose, the color of budding affection in Ky'rellian symbolism, a color rarely used openly. He reached out slowly and took her hand. It was trembling. He brought it to his lips, brushing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. Lyra, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. I'm no poet, and I sure as hell am no saint. I'm a mercenary. I've done things I'm not proud of to survive. But I know what I feel. And being with you, it's not a weakness. It's strength. Her eyes searched his, wide and vulnerable. But what if it is Alara's feelings? What if it is not truly me? Does it matter? Kaelen asked softly. Lyra, you're both in there. And whoever it is, she's extraordinary. He leaned closer, his gaze dropping to her lips. The rose-colored light in the cockpit deepened, suffused with hints of amber and gold affection, trust, and profound connection. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her eyes fluttering closed. Their first kiss was hesitant, a tentative exploration in the quiet sanctuary of the starlight whisper, surrounded by the silent, watching stars of an unknown nebula. It was a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope, of ancient sorrows and a dawning, unexpected love. As they kissed, a soft, pure white light, the Ky'rellian color of truth and soul-deep connection, pulsed gently from the star-binder's sigil at her throat, bathing them in its ethereal glow. It was a moment of profound intimacy, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them, forged in fire and flight, across the vastness of space. The Vraxians, however, were relentless. Their pursuit was guided by cold, calculating intelligence and a vast network of informers. Scanners on the Starlight Whisper shrieked a warning of Vraxian heavy cruiser, the Indomitable Will, had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the nebula. They had been found. "They're hailing us," Lyra said, her voice tight. The tender moment shattered. The light in the cockpit instantly snapped to a battle-ready crimson. Commander Vorlag himself. On the main view screen, the image of a Vraxian commander appeared. He was hulking, reptilian, his scales the color of tarnished bronze, his eyes like chips of obsidian. Ky'rellian vessel. Vorlag's voice boomed, dripping with arrogance. "You have something that belongs to the Vraxian Imperium, and you have a passenger of particular interest. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will peel your ship apart molecule by molecule." Kaelen stood beside Lyra, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Looks like our quiet time is over." "The Lumina's sanctuary is at Aethel's rest," Lyra said, her gaze fixed on the Vraxian commander. "The Chronos Key has given us the final coordinates. We must reach it before they do. Then we give Commander Vorlag a chase he won't forget," Kaelen said, a grim smile on his face. "Can this ship outrun that battle bucket?" "Outrun, perhaps not indefinitely," Lyra replied, her hands already flying over the controls. "But outmaneuver, yes." The Starlight Whisper's engines flared. "Strap in, Kaelen. This will be intense." The chase was a desperate volley through the nebula's swirling gas clouds and asteroid fields. Lyra pushed the Starlight Whisper to its limits, her Ky'rellian physiology allowing her to execute maneuvers that would have blacked out any other pilot. Kaelen, acting as gunner and systems manager, fought to keep their shields up and their weapons firing, his resourcefulness taxed to the extreme. The Vraxian cruiser, though larger and more heavily armed, was less agile. "They're trying to hurt us," Kaelen observed as disruptor fire bracketed their ship. "Towards what?" "Aethel's rest is not just a system," Lyra said, her voice strained as she navigated a particularly tight passage between two collapsing proto-stars. "According to the key, its central feature is a hollowed-out moon, a precursor artifact, Tartarus Station. The legends say it was a place of great sorrow, a prison or a tomb. A hollowed-out moon, converted into a secret military base or weapon," Kaelen muttered, the description chillingly familiar from old mercenary briefings about Vraxian tactics. "That's where they'll take the Lumina. That's where they'll build their damn truth drug machine." They managed to break free from the nebula, the Vraxian cruiser still in pursuit, but momentarily hampered by the dense stellar nursery. Ahead lay the Aethel system, dominated by a dying red giant, and orbiting it, a scared, pitted moon that radiated an unnatural coldness, Tartarus Station. It was larger than any station Kaelen had ever seen, bristling with Vraxian weaponry. "Looks like the welcoming committee is already here," Kaelen said grimly, as Vraxian fighters swarmed from the moon base. "We can't fight them all," Lyra stated, her face pale but resolute. The light in the cockpit was a desperate, flickering red. "We need to get inside Tartarus, find the Lumina, and free it. It's our only chance. Infiltrate a Vraxian superfortress, rescue a mythical creature, and escape with our skins intact, all while their fleet is breathing down our necks." Kaelen gave a short, humorless laugh. "Sounds like a plan. Any bright ideas, Starbinder?" Lyra's eyes for a moment seemed to glow with an ancient light, the Lyra persona surfacing. "The Chronos Key, it shows hidden pathways, temporal distortions even within the station's structure. Old precursor maintenance conduits, shielded from Vraxian sensors. If we can reach a specific entry point..." Their small ship, battered and smoking, evaded the Vraxian fighters by the narrowest of margins. Lyra using the station's own defensive emplacements as cover. She aimed for a barely visible fissure near one of the station's poles, a scar from some ancient celestial impact. "This is it," she cried, as the starlight whisper scraped through the narrow opening. Alarms blaring, shields failing. They crashed, rather than landed, deep within a dark, echoing cavern inside Tartarus Station. The impact was violent. Kaelen was thrown from his seat, despite his restraints, his head striking the console hard. Darkness claimed him. When Kaelen awoke, it was to Lyra's anxious face leaning over him. The emergency lights of the wrecked cockpit cast a dim, pulsing orange glow, chaos and warning. Her hand was on his cheek, and he could feel the faint, warm tingle of kerosene. "Kaelen, are you all right?" Her voice was laced with concern, her usual stoicism completely gone. The light immediately around her was a soft, worried lavender. "Peachy," he groaned, sitting up, his head throbbing. "Report. Ships totaled. We're inside Tartarus Station, in what appears to be an ancient precursor lava tube, repurposed by the Vraxians as a lower-level maintenance conduit. No immediate Vraxian presence, but they'll find the crash site eventually." She held up the Chronos Key data crystal. The key is still functional. It indicates the Lumina is being held in the station's core, in a high-security bio-containment facility. "Right. So, a stroll through a Vraxian stronghold," Kaelen said, pulling himself to his feet, checking his weapons. "At least we don't have to worry about parking." He looked at Lyra. She was pale, a smear of grease on her cheek, but her eyes burned with determination. The deep indigo of her sash seemed almost black in the dim light, the color of a desperate, final stand. "The Vraxians will be trying to break the Lumina's spirit, to force it to produce the tears they need," Lyra said, her voice filled with a cold anger. "We don't have much time." The Starbinder's sigil at her throat pulsed with a faint, insistent light. Lyra, she knew this place. There are echoes here, weak points. They salvaged what they could from the Starlight Whisper medkits, rations, spare energy cells, and a portable plasma cutter. Kaelen, relying on his mercenary instincts and Lyra's Elera-guided insights into the precursor architecture, led them through a labyrinth of dark, metallic corridors and echoing chambers. The air was cold, stale, and carried the distant hum of powerful machinery. Vraxian patrols were frequent, their harsh voices and clanking armor a constant threat. They avoided them through stealth and Kaelen's knack for finding unlikely hiding places. Once they were nearly discovered. A Vraxian sentry rounded a corner unexpectedly. Before Kaelen could react, Lyra moved with lightning speed. A shimmering wave of golden Ky'rellian energy, more focused and potent than he'd ever seen her use, pulsed from her outstretched hand, enveloping the Vraxian. The alien slumped to the ground, unconscious but unharmed. Kaelen stared. "You can do that." Lyra looked at her own hand, a flicker of surprise on her face. "I didn't know I could." Alara, she knew ways to use the Ky'rellian not just for healing, but for persuasion, a calming of the aggressive spirit. The light around her was a mixture of astonished gold and determined violet. "Useful," Kaelen conceded. "Let's try to keep persuasion as a last resort." As they moved deeper into Tartarus Station, the Vraxian presence intensified. They passed detention blocks filled with captives from a dozen different species, their faces etched with despair. The sight fueled Lyra's cold fury, and Kaelen's grim resolve. The Vraxians were indeed the slavers of nightmare. They finally reached the approach to the station's core. It was heavily guarded. A massive reinforced blast door blocked their path, crawling with Vraxian sentries and automated turrets. "No way through there with stealth," Kaelen muttered. Lyra closed her eyes, her hand on the Starbinder's sigil. It glowed with a fierce, white light. "There is another way. A resonance chamber, part of the old precursor systems. Elera used it to amplify thought, to project will. If I can reach it, I might be able to create a diversion, disable some of their internal security." It was a risky plan, but it was their only option. Kaelen created a small diversion, a series of timed sonic charges, drawing some of the guards away. Under this cover, Lyra slipped into a narrow access tunnel that, according to Elera's half-remembered knowledge, led to the resonance chamber. The light she chose for her own focus was a brilliant, unwavering sapphire, the color of profound mental clarity and power. Kaelen waited, hidden in the shadows, every nerve taut. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, alarms blared throughout the station. Lights flickered. Automated voice commands in the Vraxian tongue barked conflicting orders. The turrets guarding the blast door sputtered and died. Several Vraxian guards clutched their heads, disoriented. Lyra emerged from the tunnel pale but triumphant. It worked. I resonated with the station's core systems, overloaded their local security net, but they'll adapt quickly. Quickly enough for us, Kaelen said, grabbing her hand. Let's go! They slipped past the confused Vraxian guards and through the now unguarded blast door. They found themselves in a vast, cylindrical chamber at the very heart of Tartarus Station. And there, suspended in a crackling energy field, was the Lumina. It was a creature of breathtaking, heartbreaking beauty. Not solid, but formed of swirling incandescent light, like a captured nebula given sentient form. Its shape was vaguely humanoid but elongated, graceful, its colors shifting through every hue imaginable, from the deepest indigos of sorrow to the brightest golds of hope. And from its luminous eyes, tears of pure, solidified light, like tiny, multifaceted crystals, fell slowly, collected by Vraxian machinery below. The air thrummed with its silent, psychic grief. Commander Vorlag stood on a platform overlooking the Lumina, his reptilian features alight with triumph. Vraxian technicians bustled around complex consoles, monitoring the extraction process. Behold Ky'rellian, Vorlag boomed, his voice amplified, apparently alerted to their intrusion. Guards swarmed into the chamber. The culmination of Vraxian ingenuity. The Lumina's sorrow will be our strength. Its tears will break the will of our enemies. Ensure our dominion across the stars. Your dominion is built on pain and slavery. Lyra cried out, her voice ringing with a power that silenced the chamber for a moment. The Starbender's sigil blazed with an intense, pure white light. She stepped forward, no longer just Lyra, but Elara the Starbender, her eyes blazing with ancient fury. The Lumina will not be your weapon. Kaelen didn't wait for monologues. He opened fire on the Vraxian guards, his blaster bolts finding their marks with deadly accuracy. Lyra, free the Lumina! I'll keep them busy. The battle was joined. Kaelen, a lone mercenary against a squad of elite Vraxian shock troopers, fought with the desperate courage of a man with nothing left to lose, but everything to gain. He moved like a phantom, using the Vraxian equipment as cover, his shots precise, his movements economical. Lyra, meanwhile, sprinted towards the control console for the Lumina's energy field. Vraxian technicians tried to stop her, but she moved with the speed and grace of a striking falcon. The golden Ky'rellian energy now flowed from her freely, not as a weapon of overt force, but as a shield, deflecting poorly aimed blaster shots, and as a disorienting wave, making technicians stumble and fumble with their controls. Her presence, imbued with Elara's fierce will and the pure light of the sigil, was a beacon of defiance. The colors around her swirled crimson for battle, gold for power, and an unwavering sapphire for clarity of purpose. Commander Vorlag, enraged, drew his own heavy disruptor rifle and took aim at Lyra. Insolent worm, you will die with your pathetic myth. But as he fired, the Lumina itself reacted. A wave of pure, overwhelming sorrow, so potent it was almost a physical force, washed through the chamber. Vraxian guards faltered, clutching their heads, their aggression momentarily replaced by a profound, debilitating grief. Even Kaelen felt its touch, a pang of ancient loss that nearly brought him to his knees. Vorlag roared in pain and fury, his shot going wide. Lyra reached the console. Her hands flew over the controls, not with learned skill, but with an instinctive understanding that came from Elara. The precursor interface responded to her touch, the symbols lighting up. Almost there, she cried. Kaelen, recovering from the psychic wave, saw Vorlag aiming again, this time directly at Lyra's unprotected back. Look out! There was no time. Kaelen threw himself forward, tackling Lyra, pushing her clear just as a disruptor bolt seared the air, where she had stood, vaporizing the console. They tumbled to the ground, Kaelen shielding her with his body. The controls are destroyed. Lyra gasped, looking at the smoking ruin. Then we do it the hard way? Kaelen grunted, rolling to his feet, pulling her up. The energy field projectors, take them out. The Lumina, sensing their intent, seemed to gather its light, focusing it into a brilliant, almost blinding radiance. It pulsed, and another wave emanated from it, not of sorrow this time, but of pure, unadulterated hope, a feeling so potent it staggered the remaining Vraxians and filled Kaelen and Lyra with renewed strength. They fought side by side, a mercenary and a Starbender.